We were importing from 11 countries. We actually have not received any permit for conveyancing. Just to remind the members, conveyancing is essentially where a landlocked country would apply through the NCACC to actually have their products traverse the surface area of South Africa to their country. And then we also have exports which are different from those that I had mentioned earlier on. Those were munitions. These are actually exports that are what we call the dual list items. It's mainly technology. And we had applications that were 29 with a value of 52.7 million rands, and these were exportation to 13 countries. Next slide, please. These then are the figures for Q2 of 2022. We received 33 applications for registration and were approved, 3 marketing, and the contracting authorizations were 43 with a contract value of 3.7 billion rands, and the countries contracted with were 22. The export of munitions were 146 permits approved with a value of 570.3 million rands and exporting to 39 countries. Next slide. We imported, authorized for importation, 74 applications with a total value of 74.5 million rands, importing from 16 countries. And in this case, in Q2, there was a conveyancing that was approved by the NCACC. And then the export, which is the dual use goods, was 27 applications approved. And we had 196.4 million rands worth of those. And that is to exporting to 21 countries. Next slide, please. As per request of the committee in the past, we actually have tweaked also how we present both the Q, that is the quarterly reports, but also this time I also expanded in including the import statistics so that we also can actually show that to the committee. The export values, therefore, for 2022 were for Q1, 833.7 million rands from 127 applications. And that compared to the same period last year, it was 600.1 million rands from 133 applications. For Q2, the amount is 570.3 million rands from 846 permits, as compared to last year, in that period, where we had 1 billion and 0.21 rands, a million rands from 137 permits, which therefore then says for Q1 in 2022, we had more value as compared to Q1 of 2021, but that actually was achieved with lesser permits per quarter of 127 as compared to 133 last year. And for Q2, unfortunately, compared to last year, the amount is almost half, that's 570 million rands, but the amount of permits issued was higher as compared to last year, while last year's figures were higher in terms of the value of exports, almost by twice as much compared to this year. Next slide, please. This is an exposition for the first time of what the imports look like. For Q1, we had 36.5 imports for Q2 from 58 permits as compared to last year. Q2, 6.7 million rands from 63 permits. And for Q2 this year, we had 74.5 million rands from 74 permits as compared to last year, same period, 57.7 million rands. So what we then have for imports in Q2, more imports in Q2 as compared to last year, However, the permits issued in Q2 of 2022 were lesser as compared to last year's. And then Q2 of 2022, we had a positive outcome of both the value as well as the permits as compared to last year. Next slide, please. I will then talk briefly about the audit outcomes. The Office of the Auditor General adjusted the period for which we are being audited because the arms control calendar is a calendar year instead of a financial year. We now actually are being audited correctly in terms of their own standards, in terms of the calendar year instead of a quarter year. We have had a clean audit. I'd like to report, and matters that were raised were essentially in the management report, and they just related to some administrative glitches here and there. There were 2 items that we needed to look into. Next slide, please. The discussion I'm going to have briefly on IT is as follows. Chairperson in your committee, the IT matter is not about the Directorate Conventional Arms Control having a system which is manual. It is actually a system that is not fully digitized. So the current system that we have now, which is new, is essentially the one that is bringing us to the level of where we will be fully digitized. User acceptance testing has been successfully done. Further work still continues for debugging of the system. As indicated earlier, both systems are running side by side. And right now we're continuing with the time and field interventions. At the time we spoke to the committee presenting the Q4 of last year and annual, I had mentioned that there were anticipated further costs, and these now have been realized. There are about 5.5 million rands. They are quantified from outstanding invoices that actually had not been paid. We are in the process of finalizing payment owing to the fact that our money essentially comes from the budgets of the Department of Defense. The outstanding amount has impacted further training and system support, but I'm of the view that once we are finalized with the clearing of this backlog in terms of payments, that we shall get up to full steam in terms of finalizing training as well as system support. Next slide, please. Chairperson or joint chairs and committee members, this is the matter that you all, I think, know of. This is a matter where Open Secrets and the Lawyers for Human Rights had actually taken the NCACC to court. The chairperson of the NCACC and the Minister of Defense were both first and second respondents. And the case was in 2 parts, part 1 and part 2. The committee would be aware that we actually had part 1 uncontested owing to some administrative difficulties, and that position still remains. Part 2 has not proceeded very far, in the sense that because of the dispute in matters of discovery, the court was approached to actually have this matter handled under case management. As indicated in the past interaction with this committee, I did indicate that a case manager had been appointed, which is Judge Bam, and the matter is still at case management. There's not much I can report on this matter. It still is ongoing. I, however, wish to point out that the same entities, Open Secrets, as well as the Lawyers for Human Rights, had written to the NCACC requesting clarification on applications for Myanmar. And this is a country in Southeast Asia, and the complaints there were, they understood, as you have said in one of the presentations, that the NCACC had taken a decision not to export to Myanmar. I confirmed with them that that is the case. The NCACC had not authorized that exports should go to Myanmar. However, what we were reflecting in our reports, which got them to write to us, was essentially permits that were in process that had not come up into the system. As the committee would know, very often when deliveries are being done, there is a delivery verification process that completes the cycle of, did the things go to their end destination? Were they fully accounted for? And that is why you do not therefore rush to conclude and reflect those figures in your reports. I think from where I stand, committee members, I am confident that they have been responded to fully. However, in the event they should choose to go the route of litigation, unlike in the first time when they actually took the committee through what we currently have now as the stalemate, we should be ready to actually defend the Myanmar matter. Should it actually arise into litigation. Next slide, please. I think that is all I can share with you, Chair and your committee.
Okay. No, thank you very much, Advocate, for your presentation. Indeed, we are now at the time where we can take questions. See, my question is in relation to the judgment on part one of the case that you've spoken about. If my mind serves me well, was that the judgment was putting you on certain terms that were in fact favorable to the applicants at the time. I know that the matter is contested and it will be subject of the second application, part two. In other words, part two of the application, a court application. Now, in view of the fact that the decision was in their favor, and from the time the decision was handed down, you were expected to deliver certain information to the applicants. What is the position with regard to that? And then two, is it possible in your presentation to, when you present the exports and the imports, particularly on the imports, is it possible to see where, for example, the imports was at the instance of one of the organs of states? For example, the police, is it possible to see from your presentation what was the imports of the Department of Police, if it was a Department of Police or any other department for that matter? I'm raising this point because you recall that there's been a concern that we were buying, we're quick in exporting things that we can manufacture locally. There was an issue that even the Metro Police in some municipalities were quick to export things that they could find in our own local domestic market.
Export or import, sir?
That's imports.
Yeah, correct.
Sorry, that's imports, Mr. Mare, my apologies. They were quick to import, things that we produce that they can find in the domestic market. Is it possible in your presentation to say in this quarter, so much was related to the imports and arising from this organ of state and so on and so forth? I'm sure you got the gist of the question. Colleagues, I now want to take, okay, I don't see hands. Or is this Mr. Mare's hand?
Yes, sir.
This is the only hand so far. Let me just check if there is any other hand, Mr. Mare. All right, it doesn't look like there's any other. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you very much, Advocate, for the presentation. I just wanted to verify a few facts. I've seen on the first quarter, there was an exports authorized to the UAE of UAVs, unarmed aerial vehicles, of only 1,000 Rand. That must probably be a screw of a UAV. Because surely that cannot be a UAV, and it must just be a little part. If you can just maybe verify that for us, because that sounds 1,000 Rand, it doesn't seem to be realistic about that. And I just wonder whether what was that. Then I just wanted to make sure that when you report on these figures of permits, applications, and permits granted, you will recall that I've asked a question in the past whether it is possible to get statistics from customs of actual exports, because because then we have got three figures: the applications for authorization, then the actual export permits that you approve, and then there's the actual physical exports, the munition being shipped. So if we can get somehow that reflection, because even in terms of your own reports, one would see that there's a huge difference between the applications and the approval of export permits, and then sometimes the permits are a lot more than the applications. So if you can also just give us the period for which permits approved by yourself is valid, because I just wanted to find out, and for myself it makes sense that what you approved on this quarter doesn't necessarily relate to exports in this quarter. It doesn't necessarily even relate to the previous quarter. It might relate to a year before that time, depending on for what period that export permit is valid. If you can just maybe talk on that, it'll be important for me. And then I just wanted to make sure that in your reports, the transactions that you are showing there and the exports and imports, that is 100% of all the applications and all the permits that you deal with and approve. There's not a cutoff in terms of a value of import or export. Just wanted to get that straight, that we make sure that there's no other transactions over and above that. What I have picked up, Chair, and that is maybe just in support of what you have said, that we must try to support our own industry. And there was a UAV export to Benin. So we are actually exporting UAVs to Benin in Africa, and we ourselves, our own defense force, we know that the only UAVs that they've got in the Kruger actually comes from the Department of Environmental Affairs. So that is a bit of a negative, and it shows that we have got the technology inside South Africa, and we must first source inside South Africa you know, and because the technology is there. Then I just wanted to also I want to support the chair in his request that we know whether it is the defense force that has imported munitions, whether it's the police, whether it's private sector, whether it's sports clubs, whether it is hunting clubs, you know, that we can get, whether it's private sector or state. That is very, very important. And then I just wanted to make sure, I know that you are supposed to sit on a monthly or a quarterly basis, but how regularly do the scrutiny committees actually sit compared to what it's supposed to sit, and how regular do the NCACC then sit to process those applications? I must admit, I haven't picked up lately concerns from the industry. It seems like the industry is quite happy with what is happening, and hopefully that will then see in a more progressive exports. If you can maybe assist in that regard, I will obviously appreciate that. Then the other thing I just wanted to touch on, yes, the NCACC, yes, yeah, that's basically all. And then on the open secret court case, I also want to support the chair in what he has said, that last time there was supposed to be action in terms of the default judgment, and there were supposed to be applications to court to overturn that default judgment, because that default judgment is gonna be with us for a very, very long time, and that is going to impair, you know, yourself and the industry quite a lot. Thank you, Chair. If there's anything else that I can think of, I will raise my hand again, but thank you very much.
That's fine. We'll welcome that, Mr. Murray. Okay. So I now turn to you, Advocate, to deal with those questions.
Chairperson, members of the committee, I hope I'll remember everything. Okay. The judgment of the case of Open Secrets and the Lawyers for Human Rights against this NCACC, as indicated, had a part 1 and a part 2. Because of the non-defense of the matter, the NCACC was then lumped with a costs order to equivalent of 2 cancel. Also, an order that enabled the applicant to enjoy a joinder. In other words, entities that the NCACC did not want to furnish to the applicant in order to be added as parties to the matter, meant that because of the non-defense, meaning the default judgment, the NCACC is therefore then forced to comply with that order. In the event the NCACC does not actually respond effectively to that, there would then be a contempt of court, which then holds the chair and the second respondent, in this case, Minister of Defense, to be in contempt of court. As indicated to the committee, the matter is at where there is case management in order to deal with this matter. Meaning, until such time that matters can be ventilated and sorted out as regards both the default judgment as well as whether there's continuation in terms of part 2, the matter must come out of case management to then arrive at a determination of what then needs to happen. However, having not been successful to launch at any case the rescission of the first part judgment, the NCACC is under pain to comply, both for costs and also the provision of information which we have furnished, which is a subject, therefore, of case management, is essentially us complying in order such that the first respondent, which is chair of the NCACC, and the second respondent are not deemed to have actually been in contempt of court. I think that's about the short answer or the summary answer I can give. So essentially where we are, I don't want to call it a stalemate, but case management must proceed to produce an outcome that then determines our line of action.
But in the meantime, you are complying with the order because
we essentially have to, because we have not gained a reversal of our fortunes, if one can call it that.
All right, I wanted just to establish that. Thanks.
Can I proceed to the next matter?
Yes, you may proceed, sir.
Okay. As far as the imports are concerned, I could look into how do we actually break down the figures just to indicate who imported and where from did they import. I, however, have this to say, Chair and your members, and that is, it is our understanding that the NCACC authorizes these imports because the imports are going to form an input to that which the defense industry produces for the consumption of both the state, in this case, the SANDF, as well as SAPS, and this would be through AMSCO. However, there is also importation that is forming part of input for products that eventually would then be re-exported for the benefit of South Africa, but this time, these being exports that go to other countries. So that is what we probably need to look into and then track and see how best we can actually reproduce that. That is falling within the domain of our own system. I will follow up, Mr. Murray, on the issue of the value of that UAV as you've indicated, such that I can actually get it out of the way. There could be maybe a typo there or something to that effect. I will follow that up. As regards customs, I will perhaps ask the members to consider the following. The processes of the NCACC are such that when an application is approved for exportation, it is based on the fact that the country to which these exports will end up at will produce an end user certificate towards or in favor of South Africa, as well as when the goods have left South Africa and have arrived at their destination, it is incumbent upon the entity that is duly registered with the NCACC to follow up such that they can then give us, the NCACC Secretariat, proof of delivery, and that is the delivery verification certificate. That concludes the process of whether the thing, one, was authorized to be exported, two, did it leave the shores, and three, did it arrive at the end destination as was determined. Having done that, it then concludes for us at NCACC the cycle or circle of what would have left from a shop floor somewhere in Irene or wherever would have gone through the harbor and reached the end destination. The statistics around what happens at customs do not fall under the Act. I will have to investigate it and see how best they, at statistics, at customs rather, are willing or are able to share information that they may have. Certainly, the NCACC under the Act is responsible to then say, we were convinced that an application met Section 15. Having done that, Secretariat has issued the permit as instructed by us as the NCACC in order for the goods to leave. And those goods have left with an EUC that eventually was proven to have resulted in a delivery that was proven through a delivery verification certificate that then completes the cycle. So I'm not saying to the committee, it is not possible, I'll have to investigate it, but I'm also calling the committee to consider that we may perhaps be looking for things that are not falling under the remit of the Act, but perhaps for completeness sake, have to rely on other parties to help us to actually get that type of information that may be useful. If I am successful with actually doing that, I shall report back. In the event I am not, it will not be through lack of trying, but that may actually be a thing that falls outside the remit of what the NCACC actually Act and its regulations essentially provides for. The meetings of the NCACC are held once a month for 10 months in a year. The months that we do not have an NCACC meeting is normally December and January. And the cycle works as follows: chair and new committee. When an application is received by the secretariat and is being processed where, it is sent to the review departments who use their disparate types of act to evaluate the application. It is done on the basis of a 6-week cut-off date. That then says there is a 14-day response period by which the review departments would have returned their comments back to the secretariat, who then collates those comments in order to create documents that are for the scrutiny committee. The scrutiny committee meets on the second Thursday of each month, also in that period, February to November, while the NCACC meets on the last Thursday of each month. It therefore means the NCACC shall not sit unless the scrutiny has set. And there's always a 2-week gap between when the scrutiny will have set or shall have set, in order for us, Secretariat, to be able to prepare the documents for the forthcoming NCACC meeting. I hope that explanation perhaps helps with both the timelines, cycles, as well as what actually happens in between. As I've indicated, committee, today we had NCACC, which is essentially the NCACC that should have set for August last week, Thursday, but has set today. So we do not have any NCACC meetings that are outstanding. And certainly the minister is there to can back up. We also do not anticipate that there shall be any that shall not happen in the months that are to come. I can only hope that Chair and your committee have been able to remember everything and then respond as well.
Okay.
Chair, if I can just maybe touch on the one thing that has not been said is, for what period is the export permit that has been issued or approved? For what period is that export certificate or permit rather valid?
The exports actually differ in the following manner. There is a time when export is authorized and it's a once-off, which therefore then says that when an applicant comes to us to apply, they have to actually fulfill that export within 45 days. It actually expires after 45 days of having not been executed. And by law, in terms of the regulations, it must be brought back to us to account for it, meaning physically, as well as to cancel it in the system. And this is to avoid a duplication and or, I want to call it fraud, but any nefarious activities that may arise as a result of that application that has been issued. So essentially, the system, therefore, then accounts for the permits that have been issued, that they eventually have to be executed in order for them to remain valid. In the event that they are not, they shall not be executable later on because they shall have expired if it is beyond 45 days. I can only hope that I've responded sufficiently.
No, you did. Okay. I see on the system, my co-chair has his hand up. Over to you, Mr. Chamberlain.
Thanks a lot, Chairperson. I'm connected to the car. I'm connecting in the car. I'm in between receptions. I was connected at the constituency office in Mobile Hall. And I think I might have missed a lot in terms of what the other members' questions that they've asked. But my question will be on the amount of ammunition that we buy from China. I'm not sure if this question was asked by an honorable member earlier. That don't we have the capacity to produce ammunition? When denial, we've got all these things. These other industries linked to the military. What value are they adding to us?
Can I respond?
Let me just check if there's any other so that we conclude.
Chairperson, if I may add, if the advocate can also respond whether we have done any imports and exports to Russia as well and to Ukraine. Thank you very much.
It maybe just indicate the period. From what period?
For the reporting period.
For the reporting period. Okay, yeah. First and second quarter. Okay, that's fine. That's clear. Mr. Ryder, I can see your hand going up.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, and I apologize. It's quite difficult when we have a debate that runs so late in the House to engage properly with the first part of the meeting. But I'm on now, so I apologize. I may also have missed some information. But if we can hear during the reporting period, have we seen any demand from new areas where we haven't seen exports going to before? That should be flagged, for as in unusual requests for exports, which may point to increasing tensions in a specific area. Is that something that the advocate can help us to perhaps give us an early warning?
Okay, all right. I think we have exhausted the questions. So this was the last set of questions.
Just one additional, if you may. I just wanted to make sure, and it links to that one question of mine, whether this is a reflection of 100% of all ammunition imported and exported in South Africa, or whether this is certain categories of munitions and weapons that you deal with. You will recall there was a case that that was exported to the Americas, but that apparently, the role of the NCACC was minute, and it only went through a committee of the police or some other arm of government. So I just wanted to know whether this is an all-inclusive, 100% of any possible imports and exports of munitions and weapons. Thank you.
Okay. All right. No, thank you very much. Over to Advocate Jolly.
Joint Chairs, committee members, I'll respond as follows. There have not been any exports to Russia, Ukraine, China, Taiwan in that order. That's the first one. The categories of before I speak about the categories, if one looks at arms control in South Africa, there are three legs to this. It is the weapons of mass destruction, which is falling under the NPT. It is conventional arms control, which is under the purview of the NCACC. And then there is small arms that are actually under the SAPS, that is their firearms and licensing unit. The act that the police are using prescribes as follows: that small arms, both in quantities of 10 and above, shall be subject to NCACC approval. However, they have the ability to approve at SAPS anything that falls below 10. We have had in the past, because we sit in all these other committees to try and help them manage this, where an applicant would apply and instead of 27 units, but would apply for 9 and 9 and 9 at the police, being separate applications in order to remain below the threshold of 10, thus denying or preventing the application to also be seen by the NCACC for approval. We tend to actually aggregate those and then deem them to be 27 and therefore subject to the approval of the NCACC. In which case, the small arms at SAPS would then make a recommendation to the NCACC for the NCACC to then approve. But we do have categories that are actually approved at the SAPS level, and it is because of the size. Mostly, anything of 75 up to 155 millimeters is actually falling under the remit of the NCACC, and that is what we, when we report, essentially report on, which therefore then says there are applications that would have been approved at the SAPS that would not actually have been approved at the NCACC. For instance, while I have spoken about items being 9, which is small arms, the regulations under the police as well say ammunition, those bullets that are up to 20,000 are approvable at their level, but anything of 20,000 must be recommended at their level to then come through for both the scrutiny and approval of the NCACC. Again, we've also helped them where they would always look at an application or an applicant coming through and placing 3 applications of 19,950 bullets in order for them to be approved at the level of the SAPS, and we've aggregated those to actually ensure that they get recommended as the SAPS in order for them to then be considered and approved at the NCACC. Therefore, what I always represent here is essentially that which would have gone through the NCACC with a likelihood that a certain percentage would have been approved at the SAPS, not at the NCACC. However, when I report on behalf of the NCACC for South Africa at the multilateral level, we include those applications, those approvals, but that is only on an annual basis when we then have to file the reports, for instance, of small arms and light weapons. We demand, or rather request, the SAPS to furnish that to us in order for us to add their figures to ours and then say, this is a total then that was exported by South Africa, and that would actually include the figures that the SAPS would have had. I can only hope that I've been able to answer effectively your questions.
Right, thank you very much. Advocate, I think you've done very well. You've never disappointed us. Colleagues, I now hand over if the minister wants to say anything, and otherwise this item is done, after which we'll then move to the minutes and then the statutory program of the committee. Minister?
I actually have nothing to add. I think that Echele has really represented the committee. Yeah, that's all I could say, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Minister. Let me thank you, Minister, and the team for the work we've done this evening. And then say you are free to leave at any time when you wish to do so. Sizokubona next week on Wednesday. Your department is hosting us in Pretoria.
Yes, Chair. So one on a call. Thank you very much.
Minister, thank you so much. Good. Colleagues, we can then now move to the next item. Minutes.
Can you see them, Chair?
Yes, I can see them. It's our engagement with the DFSC and the presentation on the presidential letter on the extension of the employment of the SNDF in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, and the presentation and discussion on the study tour options. So this was the delegation. Sorry, the attendance. If there's any correction, please indicate. We're on page 2. We are on page 3. We are on page 4. On page 5. On page 6. And the last page. Colleagues, I present these minutes. Are there any corrections that you want to effect? If there are no corrections, can I get a supporter, a mover, and a seconder? Can I get support for the minutes in the form of a mover and a seconder? Ms. Bartlett moves.
Chairperson, I will second.
Mr. Mare seconds. Thank you very much.
But in seconding, I also want to find out whether that commitment that the DFSC has given to provide us with that findings of the recommendations on 1 and 2 military hospital, whether that has been submitted to us already.
Okay. Could they come back to us on that undertaking, Nandipa?
No, Chair, they haven't sent anything.
Okay, please do a follow-up.
Okay, Chair.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Mr. Murray. All right, colleagues, we are done with the minutes. I now invite the content advisor to Dr. Velem, Janse van Rensburg, to walk us through the amended, the updated version or concept paper on our study tour.
Thank you, Chair. Is it visible on your side?
Yes, it is, sir.
All right. Thank you, Chair. I will quickly run through it. Members may recall that last week we presented the first concept note on the study tour, and then some additional research was requested by the committee, and ultimately an updated concept note was drafted and distributed to members. Just to go through the headings for the sake of members that may not have been here last week, we would like to do a study tour for the two defense committees of parliament. In short, it's based on our strategic plans of the two defense committees. Both defense committees have a provision for a study tour in the middle of the parliamentary term, and both the defense committees have not done a study tour since 2006. So there is significant scope to go and learn and do external benchmarking around defense matters. But we also wanted to make sure that this potential study tour really adds value to the work of the committee. And for that, we looked at the functions of the Joint Standing Committee of Defense, and we also looked at overlap between the Joint Standing Committee of Defense and the Portfolio Committee of Defense. And there's significant overlap, but healthy overlap in the work that they've been doing and complementing each other's in essence. Two key areas where they've overlapped we looked at, and specifically something that both committees have looked at from different perspectives is matters related to the SANDF's force structure and force design, but with a specific focus on human resources management and the whole issue around force rejuvenation, cost of employees, and so forth. And therefore, we propose that based on the work that the committees have done, based on their mandates, it is proposed that a joint Standing Committee of Defense and PCO Defense and Military Veterans study tour be conducted, focusing on matters related to the SANF force structure and force design, with a specific emphasis on cost-effective human resource management, succession planning, and force rejuvenation. So that is the key areas. The reasons why it is a good time now, it's in the middle of the parliamentary term. There's provision for this in the strategic plans of the two committees. It's been a very long time since the committees have done a study tour, and now could be a good time to look back on the work that the committee has done over the past 2 years and make proposals based on the study tour to monitor that over the next 2 years. So last week we submitted a list of potential countries based on research we've done and consultation with external researchers as well in a defense sphere that understands these things. And we presented a number of countries to members. Based on the list we presented last week and the discussion that followed from the members, we removed the options of Australia, Angola, Colombia, Singapore, and the United States. And there was a request for further information specifically on Turkey and Brazil. So based on that, the updated list of potential countries we could visit are as follows. South Africa is in the first column for comparison's sake. Last week, the committee agreed that Egypt would be a good option for a study tour. Further information added in this that I will quickly run through is around Brazil and around Turkey. And then we still kept in Germany and the UK. The reason for this is that we would like to look at one country that is perhaps in the developing world, similar economic conditions to South Africa, and then perhaps one country that is a bit bigger in economic terms and it's in its defense terms as well. So looking at these two quickly, last week we ran through Germany and the UK. Looking at Brazil and Turkey, in terms of their GDPs compared to South Africa, Brazil is significantly higher and Turkey is about double the size of the South African GDP. GDP per capita, Brazil only slightly higher than South Africa, and Turkey also a bit higher. Then in terms of their spending, defense spending as a percentage of GDP, Brazil's is the lowest here at 1.4%, and Turkey looking at 2.8% of their GDP being spent on defense, which is quite a high percentage, but we'll get to some of the reasons for that. And if you look at their military forces, both have significant numbers in their military forces. It's quite large countries with large populations and a large military. What are the key threats that they face, these two countries? Brazil has some internal, and specifically from a defense point of view, apologies. Brazil has internal stability, notable crime and corruption. There's also environmental threats that will could ultimately translate into defense-related threats as well. Turkey has significant regional instability, including conventional military threats, and there's also economic instability problems in terms of their high inflation rate and currency devaluation. But it's an important geostrategic location which has a lot of defense implications. In terms of the military shortfalls and strengths, Brazil recently went through a $190 billion modernization program between 2013 and 2019 to upgrade their defense sector. And there's also significant focus on developing their domestic defense industry. As we know, they even partnered with Benin a few years ago on the development of missile technology. In terms of Turkey, it's a strong regional force, and they have significant development of their domestic defense industry, notable defense technology. This is perhaps one of the main things that if we should decide to go to Turkey, this could be an interesting aspect to look at, specifically for the Joint Standing Committee of Defense. We could also look at matters related to civil-military relations and how they've sought to improve this, specifically after the coup attempt of 2016. Carrying on to the study tour focus areas that we proposed, looking at Brazil, that's a large military force, and they use conscription in Brazil, but it is not strictly enforced. Whereas in Turkey, they do use conscription, although conscription has been shrunk in recent years to a 6-month conscription period for Turkish conscripts. If you look at the force design and force design focus areas and compensation of employees, if you look at Brazil, the latest information I could find was around 73% of their budget being spent on compensation of employees, and that's perhaps not, in terms of what we would like to study, that's not ideal, because that is even slightly higher than what South Africa spends on compensation of employees. If you look at Turkey, though, although recent figures aren't available in open source documentation, most recently that I found was around 50% being spent on compensation of employees, and that was in 2015, and they spent in 2021, it was reported that they spent 25% on equipment. So that's a much healthier spend than South Africa, and perhaps we could take a page from their book in that regard. Furthermore, looking at the study tour focus areas in terms of force rejuvenation, unfortunately, the force age distribution is not available. If you look, for example, at Germany and the UK, there's significant information available on open source documentation, and you can see, like in Germany, around 54% of the force is younger than 29 years, whereas in the UK, you're looking at 38% younger, 30% younger than 24 years, and 38% between 24 and 34 years. So this information was not available for Brazil and for Turkey, but we could look at Turkey, for example, at recent laws to reduce its conscription periods, and provided an additional payment for people to stay on after the first 6 months of conscription. They could choose to stay on for a small salary. So it could be, that could be an interesting aspect to look at. Lastly, just in summary, again, to look at the countries in today's updated concept note. If you look at Egypt, what are the key learning opportunities for us there? It's the #1 rated military in Africa. It has a lot of internal and regional challenges, and it could be interesting to see how they manage their defense force in that sense, how do they structure it for internal and regional challenges, and perhaps look at their force structure and compensation of employees aspects, how they manage that. In terms of Brazil, it's a regional, large military with power, large military power with investment in local defense industry, similar to South Africa. But it has a high compensation of employee spending, which sort of detracts from the value of studying Brazil. In terms of Turkey, there's significant effort from their defense force to modernize the force, specifically with the use of conventional technology. And that is perhaps something we can look at specifically there. Then carrying on to Germany, it is they have good management of compensation of employees and rejuvenation. And there's lessons to be learned from defunding the defense capabilities. We saw that recently they increased their funding for defense capabilities. So what lessons can we take from them in terms of the recent defunding over the past years of the defense force, similar to what is happening in South Africa? The same applies for the UK. Also good management of the compensation of employees and good levels of force rejuvenation. So lessons can also be learned from their defense budget cuts, similar to in Germany. So those are the key learning opportunities, Chairperson and members. Lastly, I just added a little table at the end. There was also a question last week to keep in mind costs and what would be the most cost-effective way to go for Parliament. While I'm not a travel agent per se, I did a quick comparison just to look at economy class tickets for one person, just to have a comparison of what it would cost to do these trips per person. And the aim of this was just to show members that what would be likely be your cheapest option to go to different countries. So, for example, if there's a combination, the committee already agreed on Egypt, so I included Egypt in all the options. The Egypt and the United Kingdom option would be between 26 and 30,000 rand per person for the flights alone. This is only for flights. Egypt and Germany would be 22 to 28,000. Egypt, Brazil would be 44 to 47,000. So it becomes significantly more expensive when Brazil is included. Egypt, Turkey, and the United Kingdom, if you extend the study tour to include 3 countries, the price is very similar to just the price of going to 2 countries. Similarly for Egypt, Turkey, and Germany. So, Chair and members, that is the price comparison. What we highlighted here, I could have highlighted the last one as well. This is up for discussion for the committee. The last one should have been highlighted as well. It could perhaps be, and this is up to the committee for discussion, but it could be valuable perhaps to maximize the gathering of information to visit 3 countries in this trip, and therefore very close, located closely together is Egypt and Turkey, and they're both in the same developmental realm, both seeking to expand their defense industries and their defense capabilities. So that could be an interesting study to include both of them. And then in addition to that, go to an economically more developed country, either the United Kingdom of Germany, and you can see the costs here, the cost structures are roughly the same. So, Chair, I'll hand back to you. That's the updated information. And those are the options that we would like to present to members for discussion. It's open to you. Perhaps just the last aspect that the committee can discuss. There's 2 potential windows for such a study tour. Firstly, in December, from the last days in November till around the 13th of December, it might fit into the parliamentary program. And then unconfirmed, but normally there's a period in January as well, before Parliament's program starts, where we could go. So January or December, that's the 2 options. I hand back to you, Chair. Information is helpful.
Okay. Right, colleagues, here is the presentation that incorporate the discussions we had at our last meeting. So I want you to look at 2 things. One is the countries that you want to visit. We have already agreed on Egypt. There's no debate about it. Now the question is Egypt with which country or countries, and then 2, we look at the dates, whether we target the first 13 days of December, or we move it to early in January. If we target the first 13 days, the first 13 days in December, there's an advantage, because if we target and we fail, we can then move to January. But if we move to January and fail, then we'll have no any other opportunity until very late in the year. So these are the things we need to look at. Now I put it on the table. Mr. Mara, your hand is up.
First, thank you, Chair. First of all, compliments and to Wilhelm for our unbelievable work and the detail that you've provided us, and also what you have taken from our meeting last week. I think that for me, there's no doubt that we must visit Egypt. It's an African country. We must try to compare ourselves. We must see what they've done. By including Turkey, that is, that's incredible value for money. If we can basically, for the same kind of cost, fly, to both Turkey and Egypt, very much in the same time zone as us, and Turkey is very much in our sphere of defense industry, and I think kind of creativity that is taking place there, and their enthusiasm for this industry. So for me, from a value for money perspective, and I think we must try to get out of this the most that we can, that is both Egypt and Turkey, and we can have value from each of the UK or Germany. We know that we have got prime mission equipment from both countries, so we can even take from each country, either country, something about our Hawks and some of our helicopters, and from Germany the same in terms of our naval vessels, submarines, etc. So either of those, Chairperson, I will support. Maybe the UK, can be of great assistance to us. Germany, I'm not always quite sure where they stand with comparable to us and being supportive to us. But that will be my suggestion and support, that we try to get the most value for money and take those three countries. That will be relatively easy for us to fit that in. Thank you very much. Oh, and the other thing is, I agree with you on December. I absolutely agree with you on December. That'll be the most advantageous. And if we, as you say, if we then miss December, we can try to push it for January. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So I will then take Mr. Rader and then Mr. Mutle.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, my inputs on the selection would be limited to an agreement with Mr. Murray. On the dates, however, I do think that we need to be aware that we're a joint standing committee. The NCOP in December, that last week, goes through a very torturous process of amending budgets, passing the budgets. And that's normally the hot potato that the National Assembly drops on the NCOP in that last week, and that's what keeps us busy in those last few days. So my preference certainly would be for a January date, but obviously we must go with a majority. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Honorable Thabo Mutle.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and good evening to members. I want to support the view, and I think in the previous meeting where we discussed this process, there was an anonymous agreement around Egypt. Therefore, I think Egypt is not an issue. We all agree. Secondly, I want to support that the second country that we can visit is Turkey, with addition of a focus area for our study being the defense industry, so that we know that Turkey procure a lot from our defense industry, but at the same time they are developing their own industry so that they do not become dependent on the South African defense industry for supply. Therefore, I think that aspect, if agreed to, should be added as the focus area that we need to also look at when we are in Turkey. The third country that I think we can visit, and I've heard Honorable Mare is not sure, is amenable to any between Germany and UK. I think we can take Germany. If I was following very well, because of the presentation that Dr. Velem has given, it has given the stats of their force and the dominance of young people, which has a positive indicator in terms of them rejuvenating their force. I think it's one aspect that we can learn from. Therefore, I support the three countries, which is Egypt, Turkey, and Germany. When it comes to dates, I'm a bit skeptical with December. I'm not sure if December is from what date to what date. Chair, as you know, our organization is preparing for conference in December. Therefore, we don't want to be outside when things are happening. It's a very crucial event in the politics of the ANC. Therefore, we want to be there.
Yeah, it's 1 to 13. The conference starts from the 16th.
Yeah. But we might be registering, and shall we not? I'm a delegate, by the way, even before the BGM.
Yeah. No.
I like that.
Might not get his envelope.
Yeah. Okay, colleagues. I don't know. Is there any objection to? I don't think there's any objection to Egypt, Turkey, and Germany. And
no, that's fine with me.
That's fine. Yes, and that we must look at that December time. But I heard Mr. Rader saying they might be at work during that time. So we will look at the NCOP agenda. So we're not finalizing anything. We're leaving the two options open. It's December and January. It's just that there will never be, even in January, you come earlier than all of us. You may be busy in January when we're back. We'll just look at the scale and then make a determination, as it were.
Chairperson, can I suggest that in this consideration, we must liaise with our counterparts and our embassies as well, because sometimes, and you'll remember that last week I mentioned where the one time that we considered a visit abroad last year, in the previous term, at the last moment we had to cancel because it was kind of a New Year's period in that country. And that January then, was a total, wrong period to go and to even consider. So we must take that into consideration as well. And I think it's best to liaise with our embassies in those three countries, then, Turkey, Egypt, and Germany, in terms of their recommendation as well.
You are right. Please do that, Velem. You see, it's January. Whether January or December is a good time, taking into account that in some countries, January becomes an extension of, that season, holiday season.
Yeah.
And or in some other countries, even start much earlier, in the month of December. So we don't want to go there and end up becoming an inconvenience, an inconvenience to other people. So it must be a time where we'll be able to meet with people that we want to meet. We don't want to get there and told that, oh, these people are on leave.
Yeah.
Did you know that? And did you not know that we close early? We don't want that type of thing.
Yeah.
So let's weigh those factors into account. But of course, Mare is right. We must communicate with our team And so you'll still have you'll be registered by then, Thabo, and we'll still have 2 to 3 days to cool down before the conference starts. Colleagues, I think
can I just the last thing, and that is
yes.
also from previous experiences. We know that sometimes the machinery at Parliament turns very, very slowly. So we must not wait too long to do the necessary applications. Otherwise, we're running into a problem eventually, because nothing can be finalized if it has not been finally approved by Parliament.
Agreed.
So, and then we're pushing, travel agents, and we going to run into extra costs. And we need to confirm also from a professional point of view with our embassies and our counterparts and our hosts abroad. So it's all done very, very professional.
Okay. So take all of those factors, those variables into account. Don't forget the NCOP program as you make a final determination on the matter. But we are leaving it to you. Colleagues, I think we've come to the end of the meeting. The time now is 25 to 8. I don't want to keep you beyond this. Any other thing? My co-chair, are you okay? Can we close the meeting? Yeah, I think the system has kicked him out. Colleagues, thank you very much. I think the meeting stands adjourned.
Thank you. Very productive meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Sure.